Welcome to The Explainer. So today we're going to piece together this incredible story of faith and determination, all from the 19th century, using personal letters and historical accounts to guide us.
So, let me ask you this. How far would you go to follow your life's true calling? Because we're about to meet a young woman who literally traveled across Europe, ready to defy tradition and protocol, all for a single, seemingly impossible goal.
Okay, so picture this. It's the late 19th century, and this young French girl sets out on a pilgrimage to the Eternal City. But this was no ordinary tour. No way. This was a mission from the very start. And you can see it right in her own words. This wasn't just some sightseeing trip. She's surrounded by these splendid monuments, right? But she's already looking right past them, thinking about what she called the emptiness of things that pass. Her focus was internal from day one.
So, what was the real reason for this journey? I mean, it clearly wasn't about the art or the history. She was driven by this deep personal calling that had a very specific, and honestly, a pretty audacious goal.
Okay, so get this. Her singular goal, the entire purpose of this long journey, was to get permission from Pope Leo XIII himself to enter the Carmelite order. And the truly audacious part? She was only 15.
So, the path to Rome, well, it wasn't just a physical trip. It was filled with all these external wonders, but also these really profound internal challenges that were constantly testing her resolve.
And her journey, wow, it took her through some of Europe's most iconic places. From a moment of peace in Paris all the way to being completely awestruck by the Swiss Alps. Each location wasn't just a landmark, you know? It was like a milestone on her spiritual journey toward Rome.
And this is what I find so fascinating, this constant tension during her journey. On one hand, you have the magnificence and grandeur of the Alps, but on the other, her mind was already in this quiet, sacrificial life she longed for. It's like the more spectacular the world outside became, the more she focused on her inner calling.
And then, when she finally reached Rome, places like the Colosseum, they weren't just ancient ruins to her. Not at all. They felt like sacred grounds. She felt this intense desire to connect with the early Christians who had died there, seeing their sacrifice as like the ultimate expression of faith, and that just strengthened her own purpose even more.
Okay, so all of this leads to the absolute climax of her journey, the moment of truth, the audience with the Pope.
So, the scene is set for this life-changing encounter. She's in the Vatican, surrounded by high-ranking church officials, about to meet the one man who holds the key to her entire future.
And this is where the tension just skyrockets. See, she had been explicitly forbidden to speak to the Pope directly, but her conviction, it was just stronger than her fear. As she knelt before him, her heart was pounding, but she was absolutely determined to make her plea.
She had one chance, and she took it. She approached, made her tearful appeal, and got this intense gaze from the Pope. But just as quickly, an official stepped in, reminding everyone of the rules. She was gently but firmly dismissed. And just like that, the moment was over.
So, here's the crucial point. The Pope's response, it wasn't the direct yes she had traveled all this way to hear. It was a kind, but really non-committal answer that basically placed the final decision right back into the hands of her local superiors.
So, the journey didn't end with this clear triumph she had prayed for. Nope. Instead, it led to a new and in many ways an even more difficult trial. The trial of waiting and just total uncertainty.
And her initial reaction was just profound heartbreak. She felt that everything she had done, all the travel, all the hope, the sheer courage it took to speak to the Pope, she felt like it had all been for nothing.
But what's so remarkable is what she felt underneath all that sorrow. Because she knew she had done everything in her power, she found this profound sense of peace. Her faith wasn't shattered by the outcome, it was just being tested in a completely new way.
And that test just kept on going. A letter finally arrived in late December giving the bishop's permission, but then her entry was delayed until after Lent. What followed was this really difficult period of waiting that lasted for 3 more rich but still really uncertain months.
But ultimately, after all the trials, the journey, and the painful waiting, she did get her wish. She was granted permission, and she entered the Carmelite order at the young age of 15.
And this is where we find the ultimate lesson of her whole journey. She came to realize the suffering and the waiting, they weren't a failure, they were a preparation. In her own words, it was time she used to grow in abandonment, humility, and other virtues, to truly get her ready for the life she had fought so hard for.
Her story really leaves us with a powerful question for our own lives, doesn't it? What if the biggest trials, the most painful delays, aren't obstacles at all? What if they're the very things shaping the path we are meant to follow?